Chapter 1, The Chance Encounter on Christopher Street. The summer of '63 hung heavy over New York, a humid blanket woven with the threads of change and the stark, unyielding lines of segregation. In Greenwich Village, however, the air felt different, charged with a nascent freedom, a whispered promise of something new, even as the city outside grappled with its old demons. Eli Vance, a jazz trumpeter whose melodies could both soothe and ignite, navigated the cobbled streets of the village with a quiet dignity. At 30 years old, he commanded attention with his tall, lean frame, his dark skin a striking contrast to the bright summer light, and a jawline so sharply defined it seemed carved from granite. His smile, when it came, was as warm as a summer evening, but his eyes, deep and knowing, held the weight of a world that often refused to see him. Every note he played at the Blue Note was a protest, a lament, a soaring hope. He carried the burden of unspoken slights and overt hostilities, but he also carried the rhythm of a future he dared to dream of. His path crossed with Arthur Art Sterling on a sweltering July afternoon, just outside a small, independent bookstore on Christopher Street. Art, also 30, was a budding photographer, his keen eye always searching for the hidden truths in the city's chaotic beauty. He matched Eli in height, his own fair hair falling across a thoughtful brow, and his handsome face was similarly framed by a strong, sharp jawline. He was struggling, quite visibly, with a precariously stacked tower of books, a few history tomes threatening to tumble from his arms. He hailed from a prominent, if somewhat staid, Upper East Side family, a world away from Eli's Harlem brownstone, and the subtle discomfort of his situation was evident in the slight flush on his cheeks. "Need a hand?" Eli's voice was a low, melodic rumble, like the first, inviting notes of a blues tune. Art looked up, startled, his vivid blue eyes meeting Eli's. The unexpected kindness, coupled with the sheer presence of the man before him, sent a quick blush creeping up his neck. "Oh, yes, please. These history tomes are heavier than they look." As Eli, with his easy grace, reached out to steady the teetering stack, their fingers brushed. A jolt, electric and unexpected, passed through them both, a silent current that seemed to momentarily suspend the humid air around them. A woman passing by on the sidewalk cast a quick, almost imperceptible glance their way, her expression unreadable, before hurrying on. Inside the bookstore, the elderly owner, who had been observing the scene through the window, turned abruptly to straighten a shelf, a brief, uncomfortable silence hanging in the space between them. "Thank you," Art said, his voice a little breathless, the earlier blush deepening. "Anytime," Eli replied, his gaze lingering a moment too long, a fleeting sense of unease tickling the edges of his awareness. Something about their connection, even this innocent first touch, felt off to the outside world, a subtle discord in the city's usual rhythm. But the pull between them was undeniable, a quiet melody beginning to play. Chapter 2, Whispers in the Village. Their initial awkwardness quickly dissolved into a shared eagerness for more. Eli and Art began to carve out stolen moments, their rendezvous carefully chosen, almost ritualistic in their secrecy. They found solace in the quiet corners of Washington Square Park, where the rustle of leaves and distant laughter could mask their hushed conversations. They took late-night walks along the Hudson, the vast river a silent witness to their burgeoning connection, its dark waters reflecting the city lights like scattered secrets. Or they'd meet in dimly lit coffee shops tucked away on side streets, places where the murmur of other patrons provided a comforting anonymity, allowing them to sit closer than was strictly proper, their knees occasionally brushing under the table. Their discussions started innocently enough, Art's fascination with the abstract expressionists, Eli's deep dives into the history of bebop, their shared love for classic literature. But soon, the topic shifted, becoming more personal, more vulnerable. Art spoke of the stifling expectations of his family, the gilded cage of his Upper East Side life. Eli shared his quiet frustrations with the systemic racism he faced daily, the exhaustion of constantly proving his worth, the yearning for a world where his talent, not his skin, defined him. In these shared confessions, their emotional intimacy deepened, weaving a complex tapestry of understanding and empathy. The constant vigilance, however, was a persistent, annoying hum beneath their growing affection. Every shared laugh was quickly stifled if a stranger passed too close. Every lingering touch was immediately withdrawn if a shadow fell across them. One afternoon, as they were leaving a small gallery in the West Village, deep in conversation about a particularly striking photograph, Art suddenly froze. "Don't look now," he murmured, his voice tight, "but that's Mrs. Albright from my mother's bridge club, 2 tables over." Eli instinctively tensed, his hand, which had been resting lightly on Art's arm, dropping to his side. Mrs. Albright, a formidable woman with an even more formidable network of gossip, was indeed approaching, her eyes scanning the street. Art, with a practiced ease born of years of social maneuvering, quickly turned to Eli. "Oh, Eli, thank you again for recommending that book on jazz history. I'll pick it up next week." He spoke loudly, his tone overly casual, a forced smile plastered on his face. Eli, catching on instantly, nodded, playing along. "Of course, Art. Always glad to share a good read." He offered a polite, distant nod to Mrs. Albright as she passed, her gaze lingering for a fraction of a second too long, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes before she moved on. The moment she was out of earshot, Art let out a shaky breath. "That was close," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Too close," Eli agreed, the warmth of their earlier conversation replaced by a cold knot of anxiety. The incident served as a stark reminder, their love was a dangerous secret, a fragile flame that could be extinguished by a single careless spark. The constant need to perform, to pretend, to be anything but themselves when out in the world, was an exhausting, annoying burden. Yet, even in that moment of fear, the shared glance they exchanged, the unspoken understanding of the risk, only seemed to bind them tighter. The whispers of the village might surround them, but within their own quiet world, their melody grew stronger. Chapter 3, The Unspoken Rule of the Blue Note. Eli had invited Art to the Blue Note, a rare and significant gesture. It was one thing to meet in hushed coffee shops, it was another entirely to invite Art into the sanctuary of his music, the place where he truly came alive. The club was a smoky, intimate cavern, alive with the low thrum of anticipation. Art found a table near the back, trying to blend into the shadows, his eyes fixed on the small stage where Eli would soon appear. When Eli stepped into the spotlight, trumpet gleaming, he transformed. The quiet dignity he carried on the streets gave way to a powerful, almost defiant energy. His notes soared, intricate and soulful, weaving tales of joy and sorrow, protest and hope. Art watched, mesmerized, feeling a profound pride swell in his chest. This was Eli, unburdened, unmasked, truly himself. The set was nearing its end, the applause a wave that rolled through the room, when it happened. A man at a table near the front, well-dressed and clearly inebriated, raised his hand to summon a waitress. She was black, like Eli, and moved with a weary grace. As she approached, the man's voice, thick with liquor and contempt, carried clearly across the sudden lull in conversation. "Hey, girl. Get me another whiskey. And tell that boy on stage to play something I can actually tap my foot to. None of that jungle noise." The words hung in the air, a venomous, jarring chord. The waitress flinched, her shoulders tightening, but she merely nodded, her gaze fixed on the table. A few patrons shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. The silence was deafening, a collective complicity. Art felt a hot surge of rage. His hands clenched under the table, his jaw tightening, mirroring Eli's own sharp lines, but with a different kind of tension. He wanted to shout, to confront the man, to defend Eli. But Eli, on stage, merely paused for a beat, his eyes sweeping over the room, acknowledging the insult with a subtle, almost imperceptible tightening of his lips. Then, without a word, he lifted his trumpet again. He didn't play a foot-tapping tune. Instead, he launched into a slow, mournful blues, each note imbued with a raw, aching beauty that spoke of generations of pain, of resilience, of an enduring spirit. It was a lament, a protest, a quiet, dignified defiance that cut deeper than any shouted word. As the final, lingering note faded, the applause was hesitant at first, then swelled into a roar, more fervent than before. But Art couldn't join in. He watched Eli, who met his gaze from the stage, a flicker of shared understanding passing between them. Eli offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of the incident, of Art's witnessed helplessness. Later, outside the club, the cool night air offered little relief. Art was still seething. Eli, I can't believe he said that. Why didn't anyone do anything? Why didn't you say anything? Eli sighed, running a hand over his tired face. Because, Art, he said, his voice low, that's just how it is. Every day. If I stopped to fight every insult, I'd never play a note. It's an annoying burden, a constant weight. You learn to swallow it, to let the music speak. He looked at Art, his eyes weary but resolute. It's a part of my life you don't have to carry. And I wouldn't wish it on you. Art felt a profound helplessness, a crushing weight of injustice. He reached for Eli's hand, intertwining their fingers, his own anger now mixed with a deep, aching empathy. The incident had been a brutal, annoying reminder of the chasm that society placed between them, a chasm that Eli navigated daily with a quiet, enduring strength Art was only just beginning to comprehend. Chapter 4, A Breathless Confession. The humid summer nights of New York, once a comforting cloak for their clandestine meetings, now felt charged with a different kind of electricity. The incident at the Blue Note had stripped away another layer of their innocent illusion, exposing the raw, dangerous edges of their world. That evening, after Eli's set, they didn't linger outside the club. Instead, with a shared, unspoken urgency, they found themselves walking faster, a magnetic pull drawing them towards Art's small, cluttered apartment in the village. It was a sanctuary, a place where the city's harsh gaze couldn't reach them. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken words, with the lingering scent of Eli's cologne and the faint aroma of developing chemicals from Art's darkroom. The city's distant hum was muted, replaced by the rapid beat of their own hearts. Art turned from locking the door, his blue eyes, usually so composed, wide and searching. Eli met his gaze, the weariness from the club replaced by a fierce, undeniable longing. Eli, Art breathed, stepping closer, his voice barely a whisper. What happened tonight? I can't stand it. Eli reached out, his strong hands cupping Art's face, his thumbs tracing the sharp line of Art's jaw. I know, Art. I know. His voice was rough, laced with a vulnerability Art hadn't heard before. But when I'm with you, it's different. It's like the world outside just fades. Art leaned into Eli's touch, his eyes fluttering closed. It does, he murmured, his own hands finding purchase on Eli's waist, pulling him closer. It really does. In that moment, under the soft glow of a single lamp, the unspoken longing that had simmered between them finally broke free. Eli leaned in, and their lips met. It was a soft, hesitant kiss at first, a tentative exploration, then it deepened with a desperate tenderness, a release of all the fear, the anger, the quiet yearning they had held captive. It was a kiss born of defiance, a promise whispered against the backdrop of a world that refused to understand. A quiet gasp escaped Art's lips as Eli's arms wrapped around him, pulling him flush against his tall, solid frame. The kiss stretched, timeless and profound, until a sudden, jarring sound from the street below shattered the fragile peace. The distinct wail of a police siren, growing louder, closer, followed by the sharp bark of a dog. They broke apart, startled, their eyes wide with panic. Art stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. Someone's coming, Eli whispered, his voice tight, already moving towards the window, pulling the thin curtain aside just enough to peer out. A patrol car was indeed slowing down a few houses down, its red and blue lights flashing ominously against the brick facades. A nosy neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, known for her vigilant watch over the block, was already peeking out from behind her lace curtains across the street. Damn it, Art muttered, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a cold dread creep over him. They had been so careless, so consumed by the moment. The relief of finally being able to express their feelings was instantly replaced by a sickening wave of fear. The consequences, if they were discovered, were unimaginable, not just social ruin, but legal repercussions, violence. Eli quickly pulled away from the window, his jaw clenched. We need to be careful, Art. More careful. His voice was low, but the urgency was clear. Art nodded, still breathless, his body trembling slightly. The warmth of Eli's touch, the intoxicating thrill of their kiss, was now overshadowed by the chilling reality of their situation. They were safe, for now, within the confines of Art's apartment, but the lingering fear was a suffocating blanket. Their love, beautiful and undeniable, was also a dangerous secret, and the world outside was always listening, always watching, ready to punish. The annoyance of constant hypervigilance, of having to always be on guard, was a heavy, persistent weight. Chapter 5: The Sterling Family Shadow. The Sterling family penthouse on the Upper East Side was a world away from the village, not just in distance but in atmosphere. It was a realm of hushed tones, polished mahogany, and an unspoken code of decorum that Art had chafed against his entire life. Tonight, a formal dinner party was underway, ostensibly to celebrate a distant cousin's engagement, but Art knew the real agenda, a subtle, yet persistent, interrogation of his own life choices. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the clinking of crystal, an annoying backdrop to his growing internal tension. His mother, Eleanor Sterling, a woman whose smile rarely reached her eyes, greeted him with a peck on the cheek that felt more like a formality than affection. "Arthur, darling. So glad you could tear yourself away from your artistic endeavors." The slight emphasis on artistic endeavors was a familiar, pointed jab. His father, Richard Sterling, a man whose presence filled a room with quiet authority, merely offered a firm handshake. "Son. Good to see you. Still pursuing that photography, are we?" The question was less an inquiry and more a statement of mild disapproval. Throughout the evening, Art endured a barrage of thinly veiled questions and suggestions. His aunt, a woman with an unervingly keen eye for social discrepancies, cornered him by the fireplace. "Arthur, dear, have you given any thought to settling down? A man your age, with your prospects, there are so many lovely young women in our circle. The Caldwell girl, for instance, just returned from finishing school." Art forced a polite smile. "Aunt Beatrice, I'm quite focused on my work right now. Photography is a demanding mistress." "Indeed," she purred, her eyes narrowing slightly. "But a mistress doesn't provide grandchildren, does she?" The implication hung in the air, a suffocating expectation. Later, over a meticulously prepared roast, his father broached the topic of his career with more directness. "Arthur, the bank is always looking for bright young men. A stable future, a respectable position. Your grandfather built this family on stability, not whims." "Father, I appreciate the offer, but I believe I can make a significant contribution through my own pursuits," Art replied, his voice carefully even, though his jaw was beginning to ache from the effort of maintaining his composure. He felt the familiar, annoying pressure building, a tightening band around his chest. Every word, every glance, every suggestion was a reminder of the life they had meticulously planned for him, a life that had no room for Eli, no room for the truth of his heart. He excused himself to the terrace, needing air, needing a moment away from the suffocating expectations. He pulled out a cigarette, lighting it with a shaky hand. The city lights twinkled below, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the penthouse. He thought of Eli, of his quiet strength, of the raw honesty in his music. With Eli, he could breathe. With his family, he felt like he was constantly holding his breath, performing a role that was slowly suffocating him. The weight of their expectations, the constant need to maintain a facade, was an exhausting, annoying burden. He knew he couldn't tell them about Eli, not yet, maybe never. The thought was a bitter pill. But as he looked out at the sprawling, indifferent city, a defiant spark ignited within him. He would find a way. He had to. For Eli. For himself. The thought of Eli's touch, the memory of their kiss, was the only thing that kept him from crumbling under the Sterling family shadow. Chapter 6: Harlem's Embrace, and Its Boundaries. Eli's Harlem was a symphony of vibrant life, a stark and exhilarating contrast to the hushed, buttoned-up world of the Upper East Side. The brownstones hummed with music and laughter, the streets pulsed with the energy of conversations spilling from stoops and storefronts. Eli had invited Art to a Sunday supper at his aunt's apartment, a rare peek into the heart of his community, a place where he was simply Eli, beloved nephew and talented musician. Art, dressed in his most unassuming clothes, felt a nervous excitement. He was acutely aware of being the only white face in the crowded, lively apartment. Eli's Aunt Clara, a woman with a booming laugh and eyes that missed nothing, greeted him with a warm, if slightly scrutinizing, embrace. "So, this is the young man Eli's been telling us about," she said, her gaze lingering on Art for a moment too long before a smile finally broke through. The apartment was filled with the rich aroma of slow-cooked greens and fried chicken, the air thick with the joyous clamor of family. Children darted between legs, uncles debated politics, and Eli's cousins teased him good-naturedly. Art found himself drawn into conversations, fascinated by the stories, the resilience, the fierce sense of community that permeated every interaction. He felt a warmth he rarely experienced in his own sterile family gatherings. Yet, even amidst the genuine warmth, Art couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, a guest under careful observation. He caught snippets of hushed conversations, glances exchanged when Eli's hand lingered on his arm a moment too long as he showed him a photograph. A cousin, a young woman named Sarah, who had been particularly friendly, pulled Eli aside during a lull in the meal. Art couldn't hear their exact words, but he saw Sarah's eyes flick towards him, her expression serious, then a shake of her head. Eli's shoulders seemed to slump slightly. Later, as they helped clear the dishes, Eli's Uncle James, a quiet, thoughtful man, approached Art. "You seem like a decent young man, Arthur," he said, his voice low. "Eli's a good boy. A talented boy. We look out for our own here." He paused, his gaze steady and direct. "Mixing, it can bring trouble. Not just for you, but for him. You understand?" Art felt a cold knot in his stomach. He understood. It wasn't outright hostility, but a protective wariness, a fear for Eli's safety and standing within his own community. It was an unspoken warning, a subtle, annoying pressure that reminded him that even in the embrace of family, their love was a vulnerability, a potential source of danger. As they walked back through the bustling Harlem streets later that evening, the vibrant energy now felt tinged with a new, unsettling awareness. Art looked at Eli, his heart heavy. "Your uncle, he knows, doesn't he? Or he suspects?" Eli sighed, his jaw tight. "They all suspect, Art. It's not about hatred, not like downtown. It's about protection. About knowing what the world does to men like us, especially when one of us is white. They've seen it before. It's just another layer of this constant, annoying burden." Art squeezed Eli's hand, a silent promise. The warmth of Harlem's embrace was undeniable, but its boundaries were now clearer, more defined. Their love, it seemed, was a secret that had to be guarded not just from outright malice, but from the well-meaning anxieties of those who cared for them most. It was an exhausting reality, another annoying thread in the complex tapestry of their hidden lives. Chapter 7, The Public Gauntlet. Emboldened by their deepening connection, and perhaps a touch of youthful defiance, Eli and Art decided to risk a more public outing. They chose a movie theater a few blocks outside the familiar, relatively safer confines of Greenwich Village, hoping the anonymity of a large crowd would offer a shield. The marquee glowed with the title of a new romantic comedy, a fleeting promise of escapism. As they approached the ticket booth, a group of young men loitering near the entrance, their faces hardened by boredom and prejudice, began to eye them. Eli, ever attuned to the subtle shifts in atmosphere, felt a prickle of unease. He subtly adjusted his stance, placing himself slightly in front of Art, a silent, protective gesture. Well, look what we have here," one of the men sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "A coon and his little white friend. What's the matter, boy? Can't find any of your own kind to play with?" The words hit Eli like a physical blow, but he kept his face impassive, his jaw tight. Art, however, flinched, his hand instinctively reaching for Eli's arm, a gesture he immediately regretted as another of the men barked, "Or is it more than playing, huh? You two faggots making a show of yourselves?" The homophobic slur, coupled with the racial epithet, was a brutal, sickening assault. Art's face flushed crimson with a mixture of shame and white-hot fury. He wanted to lash out, to defend Eli, to defend them. But Eli's grip on his arm, a silent warning, held him back. Eli's eyes, usually so expressive, were now cold and distant, a mask of practiced indifference. "Let's just go," Eli murmured, his voice barely audible, pulling Art away from the ticket line. "But Eli, we can't just," Art began, his voice trembling. "We can, and we will," Eli cut him off, his tone flat. "It's not worth it." They walked away, the jeers and laughter of the men echoing behind them, a public humiliation that burned deeper than any private slight. Art felt a profound sense of helplessness, a churning nausea in his stomach. The casual cruelty of the world, its readiness to condemn them for simply existing, was a suffocating weight. He glanced at Eli, whose tall frame seemed to carry an invisible burden, his shoulders hunched slightly, his sharp jawline set in a grim line. "I'm sorry, Eli," Art whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry." Eli didn't respond immediately. They walked several blocks in silence, the city lights blurring around them, until they reached a quieter street. Eli stopped, turning to face Art, his eyes finally softening, though still filled with a deep weariness. "It's not your fault, Art. This is just the world. The constant, annoying gauntlet we have to run. Every single day." He reached out, taking Art's hand, his grip firm. "But we don't have to run it alone." Art clung to his hand, the warmth a small anchor in the storm of his emotions. The incident had been a brutal, unavoidable confrontation with the hatred that simmered beneath the city's veneer. It was a direct assault on their very being, making their daily existence a constant, annoying trial. But in Eli's steady gaze, in the quiet strength of his hand, Art found a glimmer of defiance. They might be forced to endure the world's cruelty, but they would do so together. Chapter 8, The Weight of the Secret. The cumulative stress of their hidden lives began to fray the edges of their carefully constructed sanctuary. The constant vigilance, the forced smiles, the swallowed indignities, each incident, no matter how small, added another pebble to the already heavy burden they carried. The easy intimacy they had cultivated in stolen moments now felt strained, tinged with an underlying tension. One evening, after a particularly draining day for both of them, Eli had faced another dismissive club owner, and Art had endured a lengthy, pointed lecture from his father about his lack of direction. They met at Art's apartment. The usual comfort of the space felt stifling. Eli was quiet, his movements stiff, while Art paced, agitated. It's never ending, Eli," Art burst out, running a hand through his hair. "Everywhere we go, every conversation. It's like we're constantly on trial. I can't breathe sometimes." Eli sighed, sinking onto the sofa, his trumpet case still beside him. "You think I don't know that, Art? This is my life. Every single day I walk out that door, I know what I'm up against. But you could just walk away. Go back to your family's world, pretend none of this ever happened." His voice was flat, laced with a bitterness that stung Art. "Is that what you think?" Art retorted, his voice rising. "That I'm just playing at this? That I don't care about what you go through? I saw what happened at the club, Eli. I felt it. And my family, they're a different kind of prison, but it's still a prison." "A golden cage, Art," Eli said, finally looking at him, his eyes weary. "You have choices I don't. You can hide. I can't change the color of my skin. And when we're together, it just makes things worse for me. It puts a target on my back." The words hung in the air, sharp and painful. Art felt a wave of hurt, followed by a surge of defensive anger. "So, it's my fault? My presence is the annoying burden now?" "No. That's not what I said," Eli countered, pushing himself up, his tall frame suddenly looming over Art. It's exhausting, Art. This constant fear. This constant pretending. Sometimes I just want to scream." He ran his hands over his face, his shoulders slumping. "And I feel like I have to protect you from my world, and you're trying to protect me from yours, and we're just drowning in it." The argument, born not of malice but of sheer, accumulated exhaustion and fear, left them both shaken. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken doubts. Could they truly sustain this? Was their love strong enough to withstand the relentless assault of a prejudiced world, and the internal pressures it created? The constant, annoying weight of their secret life was threatening to pull them apart, leaving them both feeling isolated and deeply, profoundly weary. Chapter 9, Everything Will Be Okay. The air in Art's apartment was still thick with the residue of their argument, a quiet hum of unspoken pain. Eli sat on the edge of the sofa, his trumpet case now a barrier between them, his gaze fixed on the worn rug. Art stood by the window, staring out at the indifferent city lights, the faint wail of a distant siren a mournful echo of their own distress. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until Art finally broke it, his voice hoarse. "Eli," he began, turning slowly, his sharp jawline softened by a raw vulnerability. I didn't mean it was your fault. Not really. I'm so tired of feeling like this. Like we're always under a microscope, always one wrong move away from losing everything." He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. "And I hate that I can't just fix it. That I can't make the world see us, for what we are." Eli finally looked up, his deep eyes meeting Art's. The anger had drained from his face, replaced by a profound weariness that Art recognized as his own. "I know, Art," he said softly, his voice devoid of its earlier bitterness. "I feel it too. Every single day. It's like walking through quicksand. Every step is a fight." He pushed the trumpet case aside and moved towards Art, slowly, deliberately. He reached out, his hands gently taking Art's, his fingers intertwining. The touch was a balm, a silent apology, a desperate plea for understanding. "But when I said you could walk away, that was fair talking. Because the thought of you not being here, of facing all this without you, that's the real impossible part." He squeezed Art's hands, his gaze unwavering. "You're not an annoying burden, Art. You're the only place I can truly breathe." Art's eyes welled up, the unspoken doubts and anxieties of the past weeks finally breaking through. He pulled Eli closer, burying his face in Eli's shoulder, the scent of him, of jazz and subtle spice, a comforting anchor. Eli's arms wrapped around him, holding him tight, a silent promise of solidarity. "I don't want to walk away, Eli," Art mumbled into his shirt, his voice muffled. "Never. It's so much. The constant hiding. The fear. The way people look at us. It's annoying. It's infuriating. It's terrifying." Eli held him tighter, his chin resting on Art's fair hair. "I know. It is. All of it." He took a deep breath, and then, with a quiet strength that resonated deep within Art's soul, he whispered, "But everything will be okay, Art. We'll make it okay. Together." The words weren't a naive platitude, nor a denial of their harsh reality. They were a defiant promise, a shared resolve born from the crucible of their struggles. It was a commitment to face the annoying burden of their world not as individuals, but as an unbreakable unit. In that embrace, amidst the lingering fear and the undeniable challenges, their love, bruised but not broken, reaffirmed itself. The quiet melody of their bond, momentarily discordant, found its harmony once more, a testament to their unwavering belief that, against all odds, they would find their way. Chapter 10, The Quiet Strength of Two. The city roared on, indifferent to the private battles fought within its towering walls. The 1960s continued their tumultuous march, marked by both the slow, grinding progress of civil rights and the persistent, venomous backlash of prejudice. Eli and Art's lives were still a complex dance of secrecy and vigilance, but something fundamental had shifted within them since that night in Art's apartment. That everything will be okay wasn't a wish, it was a pact, a quiet, defiant understanding that became the bedrock of their existence. They developed new strategies for navigating the urban landscape. They discovered hidden jazz clubs in less frequented neighborhoods where Eli could play and Art could listen without the immediate threat of open hostility. They found obscure art house cinemas that welcomed their quiet presence. Their walks along the Hudson became longer, their conversations deeper, their hands finding each other's in the shadows of the piers, a silent rebellion against the world's demands. The occasional stares, the lingering glances, the subtle shifts in atmosphere, they were still there, a constant, annoying hum, but now, Eli and Art met them with a united front, a shared, almost imperceptible shrug. Art, emboldened by Eli's unwavering resolve, found a new purpose in his photography. His lens, once focused on abstract forms, now sought out the quiet resilience of the city's marginalized, the unspoken stories in the eyes of those who lived on the fringes. He never explicitly photographed Eli, but his work began to capture the essence of their shared experience, the dignity in struggle, the beauty in defiance, the profound connection found in unexpected places. His art became a silent testament to their love, a way to speak truths he couldn't yet voice aloud. Eli, in turn, poured the renewed strength of their bond into his music. His trumpet sang not just of lament, but of triumph. His solos at the Blue Note, though still carrying the weight of his people's history, now also resonated with a clear, soaring joy, a private language of love that only Art, sitting in the back, truly understood. He played for the feeling, for the truth, and now, more than ever, that truth was Art. Their love was not easy. It was a daily negotiation with a world that refused to acknowledge their right to exist, let alone to love. There were still moments of profound frustration, of exhaustion, of the nagging annoyance of having to constantly be on guard. Art still had to endure his family's subtle pressures, and Eli still faced the sting of racism. But each challenge, each shared sigh, each whispered reassurance only seemed to forge their bond deeper. One rainy evening, huddled together in Art's apartment, listening to the drumming of rain against the window pane, Eli looked at Art, his hand tracing the sharp line of Art's jaw. "You know," he murmured, "we're still here. Despite everything." Art smiled, a soft, weary but profoundly content expression. He leaned into Eli's touch. "We are. And we will be. Because we said it, didn't we?" Eli nodded, pulling him closer. "Yeah, we did. Everything will be okay." Their love, born in secrecy, continued to bloom in defiance. It was a quiet melody, played against the cacophony of a changing, often cruel, world, proving that even in the darkest of times, and despite every annoying obstacle, love, in all its forms, could find a way to endure, to thrive, and to make everything, truly, okay.